So at the end of the first meditation and the beginning of the second meditation, Descartes expresses, either pretends or really experiences, a sort of conceptual vertigo. He is awash in the success of his skeptical arguments. He says he now just feels dizzy, lightheaded. He realizes now that he doesn't have any right to any of the beliefs, any of the judgments that he thought were so basic and foundational in his old belief edifice. And he seems overwhelmed by the success of this negative project. But this doesn't last too long. Descartes then turns his attention to that positive project, this idea of rebuilding his belief edifice in a way that adheres to that principle of justification that he articulated in the first meditation, in a way that is epistemically meritorious and free from defect. And so we find at the very beginning of that second meditation, there in paragraph 2, he starts to articulate the first steps towards that positive project. He tells readers, Archimedes, in order that he might draw the terrestrial globe out of its place and transport it elsewhere, demanded only that one point be fixed and immovable. In the same way, I shall have the right to conceive high hopes if I am happy enough to discover one thing only, which is certain and indubitable. So Descartes says, look, I feel kind of overwhelmed by the success of my skeptical arguments. I feel awash in doubt. And yet, if I can find even a single foundational belief that satisfies that principle of justification, that withstands that skeptical argument, then I'll know I'll have a start at rebuilding my belief edifice. And so he starts to look for that one belief that can start his positive epistemic project. And he finds it in that belief so famously expressed in the Latin phrase cogito ergo sum, loosely translated as I think, therefore I am. And so in paragraph 3 he tells us, but there is, I know, not what being who's possessed at once of the highest power and the deepest cunning, who is constantly employing all his ingenuity in deceiving me. Doubtless then, I exist since I am deceived. And let him deceive me as he may, he can never bring it about that I am nothing, so long as I shall be conscious that I am something. So the idea here is that Descartes' thinking about all of his experiences and all the judgments that he makes about his experiences. And he says, look, the evil demon can, create a misimpression, can cause me to make a mistaken judgment about any of these things. But hey, wait a minute. The evil demon can't deceive me if I don't exist. Cogito, experience, thinking, ergo sum, ergo existence. There has to be a subject to be deceived. There has to be a subject to have an experience. And therefore, there is no scenario, even the evil demon scenario, in which my existence can be called into question, even that tiny, improbable little bit of skeptical calling into question. It's always the case that if I'm experiencing, there is a subject that is experiencing, I exist. It can never be doubted. And hence I have that one foundational belief, that Archimedean point for my epistemic leverage. And so he has begun his positive project there at the beginning of the second meditations. He has found a belief that satisfies his principle of justification, that withstands his evil demon skeptical argument. So now he wants to build upon that success. What else can he know about himself then? What is it that the I in I think is going to be? What other properties, what other faculties can I infer about this thing? And so he asks in paragraph 8, but when then am I? A thinking thing. And what is that? Something that doubts, that understands, that affirms, that denies, that wills, refuses, and also imagines and senses. And so Descartes says, there are many things that I can know about the nature of me, a thinking thing, a mental substance, a kind of stuff that is the stuff that thinks. I know that it can doubt, it can understand, it can affirm, it can deny, it can will, it can refuse, it can imagine, and it can sense. I can know all these things about this stuff. I am the thinking stuff, because these are all reactions that I have to sensations. These are all ways in which I'm responding to the world. And in order for me to respond these ways, I have to be aware of what I am doing. I have to know for certain that I am doubting something. How can I doubt something if I don't know that I'm doubting it? How can I understand something if I don't know that I understand it? Affirm it if I'm not conscious of my affirmation, and so on. So now he started to make some further inroads. He started to build up that knowledge edifice from that seemingly humble, simple Archimedean cogito ergo sum. He turns his attention now from himself, from that thinking stuff, to the rest of existence, to the other stuff. And he asks himself about the nature of the external world and how he's related to the world through sensations. And so he considers a little piece of honeycomb, beeswax from a beehive. And he says, when I look at this piece of beeswax, there are all sorts of sensory properties that I become aware of, that I associate with, and I use to identify this as a piece of honeycomb. It has a particular odor to it. It smells sweet still from the honey. It's got a shape to it. It is a solid, but it's a little malleable. It's not really super hard. It has a particular color to it. It's not transparent. And so there are all these properties that that piece of wax has, through which I make these judgments about what kind of thing it is. But suppose I put it down here on my desk just a little too close to my fire, and the heat starts to get to it. And what I discover as the wax gets exposed to the heat is that it ceases to have the shape that it has, because it ceases to become a malleable solid. It becomes a liquid. It loses that opaque color that it had, and it becomes a transparent liquid. The scent that it had wafts away, and so on. And all of the properties that I use to identify it as that piece of honeycomb, they seem to be gone. And yet, here it is, that piece of wax. I don't doubt that it is the same stuff. How is it possible that I can re-identify this piece of wax, even though it now has nothing in common with what we saw originally? And so he tells readers in paragraph 16, I now know that physical objects are not really known through sensation or imagination, but are grasped by the understanding alone. And from the fact that physical objects are grasped in virtue of their being understandable rather than tangible or visible, I infer that I can't know anything more easily or plainly than my mind. And so Descartes says, look, it's not that I know objects directly. What I know is my judgments about the sensations. What I know is my reactions to the sensations. I identify an object. I associate it with a particular set of sensations by my understanding, by my judgment, not by those sensations. Those sensations aren't the things that get me at the object at all, or so he claims. So in the next lecture, we'll turn our attention to Meditations 3 and Meditations 4.